And so they finally did it. Play Valorant tweeted out, after a few weeks of tracking, we're upping the cost of the Stinger and adjusting the damage fall off in time for patch 6.02. We feel the Stinger is overperforming at its price point, especially in the early rounds, and lacks the right economical trade-offs. And here are those exact changes. The cost is going from 950 to 1100, and the damage fall off has changed as well. It was previously 27 damage at 0 to 20 meters. That's now 27 damage at 0 to 15 meters. And it was 25 damage per bullet at 20 meters plus, but now it's 23 damage per bullet at 15 meters plus. I remember they did a similar thing with the Spectre, back in the day and whatnot, with the fall off changes and whatnot. So this is kind of in line with that, and obviously the cost increase coming as well. The Stinger will obviously be a bit worse. And this is going to go live on February 7th, so really not too long from now. But let's talk about how bad will the Stinger be. Is it still a usable gun, or should you just not use it at all? Well, personally, I do think that the Stinger will still be okay, mostly because most of your kills with a Stinger, I'm going to assume, or at least it is the case for me and most kills I've seen, are still within 15 meters. There will be, of course, some cases where that was 20 meters and you were still within range. Now you're not in range, so you'll do less damage. But I would think that most kills in this game with a Stinger are still coming at that 15-meter range or closer. And obviously the cost increase is just obviously a nerf, right? So whilst I don't think that the damage fall off is like crazy and it's going to just nerf the gun completely, never use it, combined with the cost increase as well, this obviously is a pretty significant nerf. But I do still think, even at 1100 credits, with the damage and what it is, I do still think that this gun is usable. I don't think that this is like, the Bucky now or whatever, right? Where it's just like, just don't use it. The old Stinger probably was worth 1100 credits either way, right? And I think that this Stinger will still be good enough. The only thing now, and I think that this is a good thing, is before, when you were talking about Stinger versus Bucky versus Marshall versus Sheriff, everyone was kind of picking the Stinger. Now that the Stinger costs more and is a bit worse as well in terms of damage, now there is that kind of like debate. Do I want a Marshall or do I want a Stinger? Do I want a Buck? There is more of a debate there to be had when choosing the Stinger versus those other guns in that kind of similar price range. So that is obviously a very good thing. But there are a couple of questions that I do have that I don't know the answer to. Maybe some of you do in the comments down below, which is, I'm not sure what patch they will be using at VCT lock-in. I do hope it's this patch. The reason is I don't want to go into VCT lock-in and just see a ton of Stinger forces, which will definitely happen if they play on the patch previously. So I am very hopeful that, we get this patch instead, so I can see, how our team's reacting to it. This isn't some like monumental game-breaking change that, pro teams just don't have enough time to react to one gun changing its cost and damage fall off a bit. That should be fine. Most teams will get by just fine, and they'll use the Stinger probably a bit less, and that will be that, right? So I hope that this is the patch that they use, but I'm not 100% certain that it will be. And then the other thing, of course, is in terms of forcing. Now, those of you who are familiar with this channel will know that I very recently made a video about forcing and why forcing is, good. If you plant the spike on the attacking pistol and you lose the round, why I think that forcing is, the correct choice in that circumstance. But obviously a big part of that was the Stinger. And if you've been watching the NA challenges, you will have seen a ton of second round Stinger forces, sometimes successful, sometimes not, but you've just been seeing it an absolute ton. This obviously has a massive impact on those rounds because you don't have many credits, and so losing 150 extra credits, that could mean losing a bit of util, it could mean not buying full shields, right? It could have a very, very big impact on terms of what you can actually buy on that second round force. So that is going to have a big impact on whether teams go for those forces or not. Now, if you are to ask me, do I still think, forcing is worth it, even if you have to go for, worse buys than you were before? I personally would still say yes. I am interested in seeing, what teams do with this and how they react to this, and whether this has a big impact on how often you win forces and stuff like that. I am going to be taking a look at all of that, but I do personally still think that it will ultimately still be worth it. But obviously this is a bit of a hit to that second round force, and it does make it, in my opinion, more of a decision now, whereas before it was like very automatic. It was you should have just been forcing the whole time when you planted the spike, but lost the attacking pistol because the stinger was just really good. Now at least I can see a choice where, yes, there is some argument to be made for not going for it because your guns or your shields or your util won't always be there and will be good enough to reliably, have a chance of winning that second round. So overall, I do think that this is a good change. I think, it's a change that was pretty obvious to most people, and so I'm happy that the devs have done it, and I do hope that VCT lock-in is played on this patch, because otherwise we'll just be living in a different world where everyone just keeps forcing stingers, whereas, with this change they might not. So let's see what happens. Hopefully they're playing on the other patch, and yeah, let me know what you think of the changes down in the comments below.